The concert hall fell silent as the young man's fingers flew across the piano keys. Every note was perfect. Every movement was precise. The audience sat mesmerized, watching someone who had been called a genius since he was 5 years old. His name was Daniel Park, and at 24 years old, he had already performed in some of the most famous concert halls in the world. Critics wrote articles comparing him to the legendary pianists of history. His recordings sold out within hours. Ticket prices for his shows reached thousands of dollars, and people paid happily just to see him play for an hour. But success had changed Daniel in ways he didn't even notice. The praise had gone to his head. He had started to believe that he was special, that other musicians were beneath him, that only people born with exceptional talent deserved to pursue music professionally. 6 months ago, Daniel had accepted a position as a guest instructor at Riverside Music Academy, one of the most respected music schools in the country. Students came from all over the world hoping to study there. Getting accepted was a dream come true for most young musicians, but studying under Daniel Park was more like a nightmare. He walked through the practice halls like a king inspecting his subjects. When students played for him, he would stand with his arms crossed, his face showing disgust at every small mistake. His comments were harsh and cutting. He had made more than one student cry during his lessons. "Why are you even here if you can't play a simple scale correctly?" he once told a nervous 15-year-old. "Boy, maybe you should consider a different career path," he said to a girl who stumbled during a difficult passage. The other instructors at the academy noticed his behavior, but Daniel Park brought prestige to the school. Parents wanted their children to study with him, even if it meant enduring his cruelty. The academy's director, Dr. Helen Rodriguez, had spoken to him several times about being kinder to students, but Daniel always had the same response. "I'm preparing them for the real world," he would say. "If they can't handle honest criticism, they'll never make it as professional musicians." It was a cold Monday morning in October when Dr. Rodriguez called Daniel into her office. She sat behind her desk with a thin folder in front of her. "Daniel, I want to talk to you about a new student joining our advanced piano program," she began. Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "Another rich kid whose parents think paying tuition will make them talented?" Dr. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "Actually, she earned her place here through a competitive audition." The judges didn't know anything about her background. They only heard her play, and they unanimously voted to accept her. "Fine," Daniel said, still scrolling through his phone. "When does she start?" "Today, and there's something you should know about her." Dr. Rodriguez paused. "Her name is Maya Johnson, and she's been blind since birth." Now Daniel looked up. His eyebrows rose in surprise, and then his expression shifted to something close to annoyance. "You're joking," he said flatly. "I'm completely serious. Maya is 17 years old, and she has extraordinary musical ability. Her previous teachers say she's one of the most naturally gifted students they've ever worked with." Daniel leaned back in his chair and laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. "Helen, come on. How is a blind person supposed to compete at this level? Music at the advanced stage requires everything to be perfect. How will she read complex scores? How will she watch and learn from master pianists? How will she see the subtle hand positions and techniques that make the difference between good and great?" Dr. Rodriguez's voice became cold. "She's already learned all of that. She reads Braille music scores, she has perfect pitch, and her memory is remarkable. The judges who accepted her had no idea she was blind until after they'd made their decision." "Then maybe we should reconsider that decision," Daniel said. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel here. I'm being realistic. We have limited spots in this program. Why should we waste resources on someone who can never actually perform professionally? Who's going to hire a blind concert pianist? That's her challenge to face, not yours," Dr. Rodriguez said firmly. "Maya Johnson is now a student at this academy, and she deserves the same respect and opportunities as every other student here. I'm telling you this as a courtesy, not asking for your permission." Daniel stood up. "Fine, but don't blame me when she realizes this was a mistake." He walked out of the office, already dismissing the entire situation from his mind. He had more important things to think about than some blind girl who thought she could become a serious pianist. The first time Daniel actually saw Maya was 2 weeks later. He was in the academy's grand recital hall, working with one of his top students on a difficult Rachmaninoff piece. The hall was beautiful, with tall windows letting in afternoon sunlight and a magnificent grand piano at the center of the stage. Daniel's student, a talented 19-year-old named Amy Chen, was struggling with a particular section. She had played through the piece 3 times, and each time she made mistakes in the same places. "Again," Daniel commanded, his voice sharp with impatience. "And this time, actually pay attention to the tempo markings." Amy's hands were shaking as she started the section again. She made it halfway through before stumbling over a complex chord progression. "Stop," Daniel's voice echoed through the hall. "How many times do we have to do this? Your left hand is completely out of sync with your right hand. Your pedaling is sloppy, and that passage is marked forte, not mezzo forte. Do you even know what these markings mean?" Amy's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded silently. "From the top of page 7, Daniel said coldly. That's when he noticed someone sitting in the back row of the hall, a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore sunglasses even though they were indoors, and a white cane leaned against the seat beside her. "Who are you?" Daniel called out. "This is a private lesson." The young woman stood up carefully. "I'm sorry. Dr. Rodriguez gave me permission to observe advanced sessions. I'm Maya Johnson. I started here 2 weeks ago, so this was the blind girl." Daniel studied her for a moment. She held herself with quiet confidence, her head turned slightly toward his voice even though she couldn't see him. "Well, Maya Johnson, since you've been listening, why don't you tell me what Amy is doing wrong?" Daniel's tone was mocking. He expected her to make some vague comment or admit she couldn't tell. Maya was quiet for a few seconds. Then she spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Amy's left hand is rushing through the arpeggios in the 3rd movement. It's creating an imbalance with the melodic line in her right hand. Also, the pedaling in the climactic section seems inconsistent. She's holding the sustain pedal too long on the ascending passage, which is muddying the harmony." The hall went completely silent. Amy stared at Maya in surprise. Daniel felt his face grow hot with anger because Maya was absolutely right. Those were exactly the problems he had been trying to get Amy to fix. But instead of acknowledging Maya's insight, Daniel felt humiliated. This blind girl, who he had already decided didn't belong here, had demonstrated better musical understanding than most of his advanced students, and she had done it just by listening. "You think you understand music?" Daniel said, his voice rising with barely controlled anger. "You've never seen a sunset. You've never watched dancers move across a stage. You've never observed the way great pianists physically connect with their instruments. You're experiencing music through a tiny crack in the door while the rest of us are standing in the full room." Maya stood very still. Her hands gripped her cane a little tighter, but her voice stayed calm. "Maybe I don't need to see the whole room to understand what's in it, Mr. Park." Something about her composure made Daniel even angrier. He was used to students cowering when he criticized them. Maya seemed completely unshaken. "Really?" Daniel said. "Then let's test that theory. Tomorrow at noon, right here in this hall, you and I will both play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. We'll let everyone hear the difference between someone who truly understands music and someone who's just guessing in the dark." The words came out before he even thought about them. It was a cruel challenge, designed to embarrass Maya and prove his point. The Moonlight Sonata was one of the most famous piano pieces ever written, technically demanding and emotionally complex. Amy gasped quietly. Several other students who had been practicing in nearby rooms had heard the commotion and were now standing in the doorway, watching the confrontation. Maya was silent for a long moment. Daniel expected her to back down, to apologize and leave. Instead, she nodded slowly. "I accept, Mr. Park. I'll see you tomorrow at noon." The accidental irony of her words hung in the air. She turned carefully, found her cane, and began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silent hall. Amy wanted to say something, to warn Maya that this was a terrible idea, but the words wouldn't come. As Maya reached the door, she paused and turned back toward where Daniel stood. "Mr. Park, I hope you choose to really listen tomorrow, not just to the notes, but to what the music is trying to say." Then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Daniel stood on the stage, his heart pounding with anger and something else he couldn't quite identify. Around him, students were whispering to each other, pulling out their phones, already spreading the news about what had just happened. By evening, everyone at Riverside Music Academy would know about the challenge. The famous Daniel Park versus a blind girl no one had heard of before. It seemed like an obvious mismatch, but somewhere in the back of Daniel's mind, a small uncomfortable voice whispered a question he didn't want to answer. What if he was wrong? What if Maya Johnson understood something about music that he had forgotten? He pushed the thought away and walked out of the hall. Tomorrow would prove what he already knew. Talent and proper training always won. Everything else was just sentiment and false hope. News about the challenge spread through Riverside Music Academy like wildfire. By dinner time, every student knew what had happened. Group chats exploded with messages. Some students thought Maya was brave. Others thought she was foolish for accepting Daniel's challenge. Maya walked back to her dorm room slowly, counting her steps carefully. She had memorized the route during her first week at the academy. 42 steps from the main building entrance, turn left at the water fountain, another 30 steps to the elevator up to the 3rd floor, then 28 steps to room 307, her roommate. A violin student named Lisa Rodriguez was waiting for her when she opened the door. "Maya, everyone's talking about what happened," Lisa said immediately. "Is it true? Did Daniel Park really challenge you to a piano competition?" Maya set her cane against the wall and sat down on her bed. "It's true. Are you crazy?" Lisa's voice rose with concern. "Maya, he's one of the best pianists in the world. He's been playing since he was 4 years old. He's performed in Vienna, Tokyo, New York. You've been at this school for 2 weeks. I know who he is," Maya said quietly. "Then why did you accept? You don't have to prove anything to him. Everyone knows he was being cruel. You could just tell Dr. Rodriguez and let her handle it." Maya was silent for a moment. She tilted her head toward the window, listening to the sounds of students walking by outside. Finally, she spoke. "When I was 8 years old, my parents took me to a doctor who specialized in vision problems. They still hoped maybe something could be done. The doctor examined me and then said something I'll never forget. He said, 'She'll never be able to do most of the things normal children do. You should prepare her for a very limited life.'" Lisa sat down on her own bed listening. "My mom cried that day," Maya continued. "But my dad, he got angry. Not at the doctor, but at the idea. He took me to a piano teacher the next week. He said, 'The world will always tell you what you can't do. Your job is to prove them wrong, but not for them. For yourself.'" "But this is different," Lisa protested. "This isn't about proving yourself. Daniel is just trying to humiliate you." "Maybe," Maya said. "But if I back down now, I'll always wonder if I could have done it. And every time someone tells me I can't do something because I'm blind, a part of me will believe them." Lisa didn't know what to say to that. She watched as Maya stood up and grabbed her cane. "Where are you going?" "To practice. I've got a lot of work to do before tomorrow." The practice rooms at Riverside were soundproofed and available to students 24 hours a day. Maya had been assigned room 12, a small space with an upright piano and nothing else. She didn't need anything else. She sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. The Moonlight Sonata. She had played it before years ago, but not recently. It was one of Beethoven's most famous pieces, and also one of his most personal. He had written it when he was starting to lose his hearing, when the world of sound he loved so much was beginning to fade away. Maya had always felt a connection to that piece. Beethoven losing his hearing, her never having sight, both of them experiencing the world differently than others did. She began to play through the first movement, slowly at first. The opening notes were simple, just a gentle melody over a flowing accompaniment. But making it sound simple was the hard part. Every note had to be perfect in timing and touch. Too hard and it sounded harsh. Too soft and it lost its meaning. Meanwhile, across town in his expensive apartment, Daniel sat at his personal Steinway grand piano. It had cost more than most people's cars. He played through the Moonlight Sonata without even thinking about it. His fingers knew every note by memory. The piece held no challenge for him anymore. As he played, he thought about tomorrow. He imagined the hall full of students watching. He imagined Maya struggling through the piece, making mistakes, her lack of training obvious to everyone. He imagined the look on Dr. Rodriguez's face when she realized he had been right all along. He finished playing and poured himself a glass of wine. Tomorrow would be easy, just another day of proving what he already knew. Talent and privilege always won. Back in the practice room, Maya was taking a very different approach. She wasn't just playing the notes. She was living inside the music, feeling every emotion Beethoven had poured into it. Around 11 o'clock at night, Lisa came to check on her. She opened the door quietly and found Maya still playing, her whole body swaying slightly with the music. Lisa had heard the Moonlight Sonata many times before. Every music student knew it. But something about the way Maya played it was different. It wasn't just technically good. It was heartbreaking. It was beautiful in a way that made Lisa's chest ache. She stood in the doorway listening, tears running down her face without her even realizing it. When Maya paused between movements, Lisa spoke up. That was incredible. Maya turned toward her voice. You think so? I'm worried about the third movement. It's so fast and technical. Daniel will definitely play it perfectly. Stop worrying about how Daniel will play it, Lisa said firmly. Just play it your way. That's all you can do. Maya nodded, but she kept practicing. Lisa eventually fell asleep in one of the chairs, and when she woke up at 3 a.m, Maya was still at the piano. Maya, you need to sleep, Lisa said groggily. I know, just a little longer. By the time the sun started to rise, Maya had played through the Moonlight Sonata at least 50 times. Her fingers were sore and she was exhausted, but she finally felt ready. This wasn't about playing better than Daniel. It was about playing true to herself. She went back to her room and tried to sleep for a few hours, but her mind kept racing. She thought about her parents, who had driven 8 hours to visit her at the academy last month. She thought about her first piano teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who had never once treated her differently because of her blindness. She thought about all the people who had believed in her when others didn't. By 10 a.m, word had spread beyond the academy. Some students had posted about the challenge on social media. A local news blogger who covered the arts scene had picked up the story. People were actually calling the academy asking if they could attend. Dr. Rodriguez was furious. She called Daniel into her office again. This has gotten completely out of hand, she said. I'm going to cancel this whole thing right now. You can't, Daniel said calmly. Maya accepted the challenge. If you cancel it now, everyone will think she backed out because she was scared. Dr. Rodriguez stared at him. You planned this. You wanted it to become public so Maya couldn't back out without looking weak. Daniel shrugged. I didn't post anything on social media. That was the students. But since it's already public, we might as well go through with it. Unless you think Maya isn't capable of handling a little competition? Dr. Rodriguez wanted to argue, but he was right. Canceling now would only make things worse for Maya. Fine, but I'm warning you, Daniel. If you do anything to deliberately humiliate that girl, you're finished at this academy. I'm just going to play the piano, Daniel said innocently. If she's as talented as you think, she has nothing to worry about. By 11:30, students started gathering at the recital hall. The room could officially hold 200 people, but over 300 showed up. Students sat in the aisles, stood along the walls, and crowded near the doors. Several faculty members canceled their classes to attend. Even the academy's janitor found a spot in the back. The energy in the room was intense. Some people were there to support Maya. Others were there because they wanted to see Daniel Park perform. And some were there for the drama, waiting to see what would happen. When the most talented pianist many of them had ever met faced off against a blind 17-year-old girl who had been at the academy for less than a month, 2 grand pianos had been set up on the stage, facing each other like opponents in a boxing ring. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, making the polished black pianos gleam. At 11:45, Daniel arrived. He wore an expensive dark suit and walked to the stage with the confidence of someone who had performed in front of thousands of people. He sat at his chosen piano and began warming up, running through scales and arpeggios. His fingers moved so fast they were almost a blur. Several students whispered in admiration. At 11:55, the hall grew quiet. Someone near the door whispered, "She's not coming." She backed out. But then the door opened and Maya walked in. Lisa was guiding her gently by the arm, helping her navigate through the crowded room. Maya wore a simple navy blue dress. Her white cane tapped softly against the floor. The crowd parted to let her through. The walk from the door to the stage felt like it took forever. Maya could hear people whispering. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, even though she couldn't see any of them. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. Lisa helped her up the steps to the stage and guided her to the piano bench. "You've got this," Lisa whispered. "Just play like you did last night." Maya nodded and sat down. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their familiar smoothness under her fingers. For a moment, she felt completely alone despite the crowd. Then she took a deep breath and centered herself. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward to address the audience. Her voice was stern. "This situation is highly unusual. and I want everyone to remember that these are both students at this academy who deserve respect. Mr. Park will perform first, followed by Miss Johnson. There will be no applause or reaction until both performances are complete. Is that understood? The crowd murmured agreement. Dr. Rodriguez looked at Daniel. He had insisted on going first, knowing that his technical perfection would set an impossibly high standard for Maya to try to match. Mr. Park, whenever you're ready, Dr. Rodriguez said. Daniel placed his hands on the keys. He looked out at the audience with a slight smile. Then he began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and the real competition began. Daniel's fingers touched the keys, and the first notes of the Moonlight Sonata filled the hall. The opening was soft and gentle, like moonlight itself spreading across still water. Every note was exactly where it should be. Every dynamic marking was perfectly executed. The audience sat completely still, mesmerized by what they were hearing. This was why Daniel Park was famous. His technique was flawless. His control was absolute. He played like a machine designed specifically to create beautiful music, every gear turning in perfect synchronization. The first movement flowed smoothly into the second, a lighter section that provided contrast to the darkness that came before. Daniel's hands danced across the keys with practiced ease. He had played this piece so many times that his fingers knew exactly where to go without him even thinking about it. Then came the third movement, the part that separated amateur pianists from professionals. The tempo increased dramatically. The music became stormy and passionate, full of rapid notes and complex rhythms that required incredible technical skill. Daniel played it with machine-like precision, never missing a single note, never hesitating for even a fraction of a second. His hands flew across the keyboard in a blur of motion. Students in the audience exchanged worried glances. How could Maya possibly compete with this level of perfection? Some of them felt guilty for even hoping she might have a chance. The final chord rang out through the hall, powerful and definitive. Daniel lifted his hands from the keys with a theatrical flourish and stood up. He gave a slight bow to the audience, a small smile on his face. He knew he had played it perfectly. There was no doubt in his mind. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Dr. Rodriguez had ordered no applause until both performances were finished, so the audience sat frozen, wanting to clap but not daring to break the rule. The silence felt uncomfortable, almost oppressive. Daniel walked to his seat in the front row completely confident. He had set the bar impossibly high. Now everyone would see what he had been trying to tell them. Talent and training mattered. Everything else was just wishful thinking. Maya sat at her piano, listening to the silence. She had heard every note Daniel played, and she had to admit it was technically perfect. But something had been missing, something she couldn't quite put into words. It was like looking at a perfectly painted picture of an ocean, versus actually standing on a beach and feeling the waves. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. For a long moment, she didn't move. The audience began to shift uncomfortably. Was she too nervous to start? Had Daniel's performance intimidated her into freezing up? But Maya wasn't frozen. She was listening to the room, to her own heartbeat, to the silence itself. She was letting herself sink into the feeling of the music before she even played the first note. This was something her first teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had taught her years ago. Don't just play the music, Maya. Become the music. When her fingers finally touched the keys, something shifted in the room. The first notes of the Moonlight Sonata emerged not as a technical exercise, but as something alive and breathing. Where Daniel had played correct notes, Maya played emotion. Where he had demonstrated skill, she revealed her heart. The opening movement under her hands felt like a conversation with the night itself. Each note seemed to carry weight and meaning. There were tiny imperfections in her playing, moments where the timing wasn't mathematically perfect, but somehow those small human touches made the music feel more real, more honest. People in the audience found themselves leaning forward without realizing it. A few students who had been checking their phones put them away, drawn in by something they couldn't explain. This wasn't just someone playing a famous piece. This was someone sharing a piece of their soul. Maya's whole body moved with the music. Her head tilted slightly, her shoulders swayed, her face showed the emotion of every phrase. She wasn't performing for the audience. She was playing for herself, and the audience just happened to be there to witness it. The second movement came alive with a bittersweet lightness. Where Daniel had played it like a technical requirement, between the two more important movements, Maya made it feel like a brief moment of hope in the darkness, a smile through tears. In the front row, Daniel watched with growing discomfort. He told himself that Maya's playing was sloppy, that those tiny imperfections proved his point. But a small voice in his head, one he tried desperately to ignore, whispered that something about her performance was reaching people in a way his never had. Then Maya began the third movement, and everything changed. Her hands exploded into motion, attacking the keys with a passion that was almost violent. This wasn't the controlled perfection Daniel had demonstrated. This was raw emotion given sound. This was someone fighting against darkness, refusing to give up, demanding to be heard. Some of the rapid passages weren't as clean as Daniel's had been. A few notes blurred together. But the overall impact was devastating. Maya played like someone who understood what Beethoven had been feeling when he wrote this music. A man losing his hearing, facing the possibility of silence but refusing to stop creating beauty. Tears began streaming down faces throughout the audience. Professor Williams, who had taught piano at the academy for 37 years, pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his eyes. Lisa stood in the back crying openly, her hands clutched to her chest. Even some of the students who had come expecting to see Maya fail found themselves emotionally overwhelmed. The final chord crashed through the hall like thunder. Maya's hands remained on the keys for a moment as the sound faded into silence. She was breathing hard, emotionally exhausted from pouring everything she had into the performance. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The silence was absolute. Then someone in the back row started clapping. The sound broke the spell, and suddenly the entire hall erupted. Students jumped to their feet, applauding and cheering. Faculty members stood with tears on their faces, clapping so hard their hands hurt. The noise was deafening. Maya! 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 Someone started chanting, and others picked it up. Lisa was screaming her roommate's name, jumping up and down with joy. Students who had never even met Maya before were on their feet, moved by what they had just experienced. Maya stood up slowly, a small smile on her face. She gave a gentle bow toward where she thought the audience was, slightly off-center, but nobody cared. She had no idea that half the people in the room were crying. She couldn't see the standing ovation or the looks of pure awe on people's faces, but she could feel the energy in the room washing over her like a wave, and she knew that something special had just happened. In the front row, Daniel sat completely frozen. His face had gone pale. His hands gripped the armrests of his seat so tightly his knuckles were white. Around him, everyone was standing and cheering, but he couldn't move. He felt like he had been punched in the stomach. For the first time in his life, Daniel Park had witnessed something he couldn't do. It wasn't that Maya was more technically skilled than him. She wasn't. But she had done something that all his years of training and natural talent couldn't replicate. She had made people feel something deep and real. She had reminded them why music existed in the first place. All his life, Daniel had believed that being the best meant playing every note perfectly, mastering every technique, winning every competition. He had spent thousands of hours practicing, refining his skill, polishing his performances until they shined like diamonds. And he had succeeded. He was technically brilliant. But Maya had just shown him something he had forgotten or maybe never really understood. Music wasn't about being perfect. It was about being human. It was about taking the messy, complicated feelings inside your heart and translating them into sound that other people could understand and feel. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Dr. Rodriguez finally stepped forward, trying to restore some order, but even she was wiping tears from her eyes. She looked at Maya with a mixture of pride and wonder, and then she looked at Daniel with an expression that said, "I told you so." Students rushed toward the stage, wanting to congratulate Maya. Lisa pushed through the crowd to reach her friend, grabbing her in a fierce hug. "You did it." "Oh my God, Maya, that was incredible." Maya laughed, overwhelmed by the reaction. "Was it okay? I made some mistakes in the third movement." "Nobody cared about the mistakes," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion. "You made everyone feel something. That's what matters." Across the room, students were pulling out their phones, recording videos of the celebration, posting on social media about what they had just witnessed. Within an hour, clips from Maya's performance would start spreading online. By evening, music blogs would be writing about it. By the next day, the story would reach thousands of people. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Maya stood on the stage, surrounded by people congratulating her, feeling proud not because she had beaten Daniel Park, but because she had stayed true to herself. She had played with honesty and vulnerability, and it had touched people's hearts. Daniel remained in his seat long after most of the crowd had dispersed. Students walked past him without saying anything. They didn't know what to say. Some felt bad for him. Others felt he had gotten what he deserved. But Daniel wasn't thinking about any of them. He was thinking about everything he had believed about music, about talent, about what it meant to be great. All of it was crumbling in his mind like a sandcastle hit by a wave. Maya Johnson, a blind 17-year-old girl he had tried to humiliate, had just taught him a lesson he would never forget. And the hardest part was admitting to himself that he needed to learn it. For 3 days after the performance, Daniel didn't come to the academy. He called in sick, but everyone knew the truth. He wasn't physically ill. He was dealing with something much more painful than a cold or flu. His apartment felt different to him now. The expensive furniture, the awards on the walls, the grand piano that cost more than most people earned in a year. All of it suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. He had spent his entire life collecting achievements like trophies, and now he was wondering what any of it actually meant. Daniel sat at his piano, but for the first time in years, he didn't know what to play. His fingers touched the keys, and he started the Moonlight Sonata again, the same piece he had played at the challenge. But this time he heard it differently. He heard how mechanical it sounded, how empty of real feeling. He stopped playing and put his head in his hands. The silence in his apartment was crushing. That night, Daniel did something he hadn't done in years. He went online and watched videos of the legendary pianists he had been compared to: Glenn Gould, Arthur Rubinstein, Martha Argerich. But this time he didn't analyze their technique. He didn't study their hand positions or their pedaling. He just listened, and for the first time he understood what made them truly great. It wasn't just their skill, though they were all incredibly skilled. It was the way they made you feel something. Each one had a unique voice, a way of speaking through music that was entirely their own. They weren't trying to play perfectly. They were trying to tell the truth. Daniel stayed up until 4 in the morning, listening and thinking. By the time the sun started to rise, he had made a decision. It was going to be the hardest thing he had ever done, but he knew he had to do it. On the 4th day, Daniel walked into the academy just before noon. Students saw him in the hallway and quickly looked away, not sure what to say. Some felt sorry for him. Others were still angry about how he had treated Maya. But everyone was surprised when they saw where he was heading. He was walking toward the practice rooms, specifically toward practice room 12. Maya's practice room. He stood outside the door for a long moment listening. Maya was inside, working through a complicated Bach piece. Even through the soundproofed door, he could hear the emotion in her playing. He raised his hand to knock, then lowered it again. What was he even going to say? Finally, he gathered his courage and knocked softly. The music stopped. "Come in," Maya's voice called out. Daniel opened the door and stepped inside. Maya turned toward the sound, her head tilted slightly. "Mr. Park," she said, recognizing his footsteps. "I wasn't expecting you. How did you know it was me?" Daniel asked, genuinely curious. Maya smiled slightly. "Everyone walks differently. You walk like someone who's used to people moving out of your way." The observation stung because it was true. Daniel stood awkwardly near the door, not sure where to begin. The small practice room suddenly felt even smaller with both of them in it. "Miss Johnson, I came here to apologize," he finally said. His voice was quiet, stripped of all the arrogance it usually carried. "Not just for the challenge or for what I said that day in the recital hall. I need to apologize for everything I believed about music and teaching. I've been wrong about so much." Maya was silent, waiting for him to continue. "I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect," Daniel said. "I practiced until my hands hurt. I studied with the best teachers. I won every competition I entered, and I started to believe that was what music was about. Being the best, being flawless, never making mistakes." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "But when I heard you play the other day, I realized something. You weren't trying to be perfect. You were trying to be honest. And that honesty, that vulnerability, it reached people in a way my perfect technique never has." Maya's expression softened. "Mr. Park, you're an incredible pianist. You don't need to apologize to me." "Yes, I do," Daniel insisted. "And please call me Daniel. I don't deserve the formal title right now. He took a breath. I humiliated you in front of everyone. I tried to make you feel small because I was threatened by you. That was cruel and I'm sorry. You were threatened by me? Maya sounded genuinely surprised. Of course I was, Daniel said. You have something I've lost. Maybe something I never really had. You play music because you love it, because you need to express what's inside you. I play music because it's what I'm supposed to do, because I'm good at it, because people expect it from me. Somewhere along the way I forgot that music is supposed to make you feel something. Maya stood up from the piano bench. Daniel, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you start playing piano in the first place? Before all the competitions and the fame and everything else? What made you fall in love with music? Daniel thought about it. The memory came slowly, dusty from years of neglect. I was 5 years old. My grandmother had an old upright piano in her living room. Nobody in the family really played it. But one day I was at her house and I just started pressing the keys. The sounds fascinated me. I spent hours making up little melodies, just playing whatever felt right. And did it make you happy? Maya asked. Yes, Daniel said softly. It made me incredibly happy. I felt like I had discovered something magical. Then maybe that's what you need to find again, Maya said. That 5-year-old boy who played because it made him happy, not because he was trying to impress anyone or prove anything. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest. He realized his eyes were wet with tears. When was the last time he had cried? He couldn't even remember. Miss Johnson, Maya, he said, his voice shaking slightly. Would you consider teaching me? Maya laughed in surprise. Teaching you? Daniel, I'm 17 years old. I've been at this academy for less than a month. You've performed in concert halls around the world. Exactly, Daniel said, which is why I need you to teach me. You still remember what music is supposed to be about. You haven't forgotten the joy and the honesty and the vulnerability. I need to learn that again, and I don't think I can do it alone. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Daniel waited, holding his breath. Finally, she spoke. I'm not sure I can teach you anything, Daniel. But maybe we could learn together. Maybe we could explore music together and see what happens. A genuine smile spread across Daniel's face, the first real smile he'd had in days. I would like that very much. And so they began meeting 3 times a week. They didn't call them lessons because Maya insisted she wasn't qualified to teach someone of Daniel's skill level. Instead, they called them explorations. Daniel would play a piece his way, technically perfect and precisely controlled. Then Maya would play it her way, full of emotion and human imperfection, and they would talk about the space where both approaches could meet. The change in Daniel didn't happen overnight. Years of habits and beliefs don't disappear in a few weeks, but slowly something began to shift. He started closing his eyes when he played, not because he needed to, but because it helped him focus on the feeling rather than the mechanics. He started allowing himself to make small mistakes if it meant playing with more honesty. His students noticed the difference first. Amy Chen, the student who had been reduced to tears during that first confrontation, found herself actually enjoying her lessons with Daniel. He stopped criticizing every tiny error and started asking her questions like, "What do you feel when you play this passage? What are you trying to say?" Other students began responding to his new teaching style. The practice room started filling with music that sounded less perfect but more alive. Students who had been terrified of making mistakes in front of Daniel began taking creative risks, trying new interpretations, expressing themselves more freely. Dr. Rodriguez watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction. She had known all along that Daniel Park had the potential to be not just a great pianist, but a great teacher. He had just needed someone to show him what truly mattered. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the challenge, Daniel and Maya were in the practice room working through a Chopin nocturne. Daniel played through it once, his technique flawless as always. Then Maya played it, her version full of rubato and emotional depth. "You hear the difference?" Maya asked. "I do," Daniel said. "You're not afraid to slow down in the emotional moments, to really sit with the feeling. I always rush through those parts like I'm trying to get past them." "Maybe you're afraid of the feeling," Maya suggested gently. "Maybe being vulnerable at the piano feels scary to you." Daniel was quiet, thinking about her words. She was right. For so long he had hidden behind technique, using his perfect execution as a shield against genuine emotion. Letting people see his real feelings through music felt terrifying. Like standing naked in front of an audience, how do you do it? he asked. "How do you play with such honesty and not feel terrified?" Maya smiled. "Who says I'm not terrified? I'm scared every time I perform. But I'm more scared of playing it safe and never really saying what's in my heart. Being blind taught me something important, Daniel. I can't see people's reactions to me. I can't see if they're judging me or feeling sorry for me or thinking I don't belong. So I had to learn to stop worrying about what others think and just be myself. I've spent my whole life worrying about what others think," Daniel admitted. "Every performance, every competition, even every practice session. I'm always wondering if I'm good enough, if I'm the best, if people are impressed." "And has it made you happy?" Maya asked. Daniel thought about it honestly. "No, it's made me successful, but not happy." "Then maybe it's time to stop chasing success and start chasing joy," Maya said simply. Those words stayed with Daniel for days. He began to understand that Maya hadn't just taught him something about music. She had taught him something about life. 3 months after the challenge, something unexpected happened. The Academy received a call from the director of the City Arts Festival, one of the most prestigious cultural events in the region. They had seen videos of Maya's performance that students had posted online, and they wanted to invite her to perform at their Young Artists Showcase. Maya was both excited and terrified. This would be her first major public performance outside the Academy. The showcase featured talented young musicians from across the country, and hundreds of people would attend, including music critics and talent scouts. When Daniel heard the news, he found Maya in the library, running her fingers across a Braille music score. "Congratulations," he said, sitting down across from her. "The City Arts Festival is a big deal. A lot of important people will be there." "I know," Maya said, and Daniel could hear the nervousness in her voice. "I'm trying not to think about it too much or I'll panic. What are you planning to play?" Maya hesitated. "I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to play the Moonlight Sonata again because I know it so well. But another part of me feels like that piece is connected to the challenge and this should be something different." Daniel thought for a moment. "What if you didn't perform alone?" "What do you mean?" "What if we performed together? There are some beautiful pieces written for piano 4 hands, where 2 pianists share 1 piano. We've been working together for months now. Maybe it's time to show people what we've learned from each other." Maya's face lit up with surprise. "You would do that?" "Daniel, you're famous. You could perform anywhere you want." "Why would you want to share a stage with me?" "Because you taught me that music is better when it's shared," Daniel said simply. "And because I think we could create something special together, something neither of us could do alone." After talking with Dr. Rodriguez and getting approval, they decided to perform Schubert's Fantasia in F minor for piano 4 hands. It was a challenging piece that required perfect coordination between 2 pianists, their hands sometimes crossing over each other, their bodies sitting close together on the same piano bench. They practiced for hours every day. At first it was awkward. Daniel was used to being in complete control, and sharing the piano meant giving up some of that control. Maya had to trust that Daniel would be exactly where he needed to be, since she couldn't see his hands. But slowly, they found their rhythm. Daniel learned to listen more carefully, to feel Maya's musical intentions and respond to them. Maya learned to trust her partner, to lean into the collaboration rather than fighting to maintain her independence. Lisa would sometimes sit in their practice sessions, watching their partnership develop. She noticed how much Daniel had changed since that first day. He smiled more now. He laughed when he made mistakes instead of getting angry. He treated Maya not as a student or as someone to be inspired by, but as an equal, a fellow musician on the same journey. The night before the festival, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, listening to Lisa's gentle snoring from across the room and felt the old fears creeping back. What if she froze up? What if she made terrible mistakes in front of all those people? What if the critics tore her performance apart? Around 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and made her way to the practice rooms. She was surprised to find the light on in room 12. When she opened the door, Daniel was sitting at the piano. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Daniel laughed. "I keep running through the piece in my head. I haven't been this nervous before a performance in years." "You? Nervous? But you've performed in front of thousands of people." "That was different," Daniel said. "Back then I was only worried about myself, about being perfect. Now I'm worried about being a good partner to you. What if I rush through a section and throw off your timing? What if my playing overshadows yours?" Maya sat down on the bench beside him. Daniel, we've practiced this piece 100 times. We know it inside and out. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll handle it together. When did you become the confident one? Daniel asked with a smile. I learned from someone who taught me that vulnerability is actually a form of strength, Maya said. Some arrogant pianist I met a few months ago. They both laughed and the tension eased. They played through the piece one more time, not worrying about perfection, just enjoying the act of making music together. When they finished, Daniel felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The next evening, the concert hall at the City Arts Festival was packed. The Young Artist Showcase always drew a big crowd, but news about Daniel Park performing with the blind girl from the viral video had brought even more attention. Every seat was filled and people stood in the back of the hall. Backstage, Maya and Daniel waited for their turn. They could hear the other performers, all talented young musicians giving their best. A violinist played a stunning Bach partita. A cellist brought the audience to tears with a Elgar concerto. The level of talent was incredible. We're up next, Daniel said quietly, hearing the applause for the previous performer. Maya nodded, gripping her cane. Her hands were trembling slightly. Daniel gently touched her shoulder. Hey, remember what you told me that first day we practiced together? Music isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. I can't believe you remember that, Maya said. I remember everything you've taught me, Daniel said. Now let's go out there and show them what honest music sounds like. They walked onto the stage together, Daniel guiding Maya carefully. The audience applauded and some people whispered excitedly, recognizing Daniel Park. They sat down at the grand piano, side by side, their shoulders almost touching. For a moment, they both sat still, hands resting lightly on the keys. Then Daniel looked at Maya and nodded, even though she couldn't see it. She felt his presence, felt him take a breath, and knew it was time. The first notes of the Schubert Fantasia emerged from the piano, and something magical happened. The piece required constant communication between the two pianists. Sometimes Daniel led and Maya followed. Sometimes Maya's melodic line sang out while Daniel provided the foundation. Their hands crossed over each other seamlessly, never colliding, moving like they shared one mind. But more than the technical coordination, there was an emotional conversation happening. Daniel's playing had the precision and clarity that came from years of training. But now it also had the warmth and vulnerability he had learned from Maya. Maya's playing had the emotional depth it always had. But now it also had the confidence and strength that came from being truly seen and valued by someone she respected. Together, they created something that was more than the sum of their individual talents. The audience sat transfixed, watching this unlikely partnership, hearing the story of their journey in every phrase. It was clear these weren't just two pianists playing together. These were two people who had learned from each other, challenged each other, and made each other better. When the final chord rang out, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the entire hall erupted in applause. People jumped to their feet, cheering and clapping. Some were crying,